Hello and welcome to another episode of my podcast where today we're going to be focusing on the controversies regarding the sport of soccer, but not any controversies where it's going to generate any sort of bad polemics when you hear the show. It's going to be more of the fun and controversial aspects that will make us think and reconsider certain aspects when it comes to the beautiful sport. The certain controversies that I'm going to be focused on in the show is the video assistant referees, rigged matches, the concept of bandwagon fans, and the controversial nature of streaming services. So if you're interested in any of those topics, then get ready and be excited for what I'm about to discuss. So the first topic has to deal with video assistant referees, or for short, VAR. Now, what VAR is, it's basically technology that is used by the referees of the sport that is used to assist them to help get rid of any, let's say, illegal plays that aren't allowed in the rule book. So basically, they help um, decide what goals count and what don't. If there's like an offside that exists, if there's handballs that are needed to give in penalty kicks, and even for instance, fouls that are considered enough to be red cards, things like that is what the video assistant referee is used for to help aid any any calls that shouldn't happen. In theory, it sounds good. But over the last few years, there has been many controversies regarding VAR by fans that they've been upset because they feel that VAR isn't used effectively, and they feel that these technologies are used against their teams that even hurts them in the long run, which makes many fans think that this concept is basically useless because the whole point of VAR is to help better the sport so that illegal plays don't happen and they don't occur. Because this concept of VAR is relatively new to the sport. It was introduced around like 2018, 2019. Prior to those years, these technologies were not used in any shape, way, or form. So for many big matches or just matches in general, we would see many offside goals being scored, many clear pens that weren't given, or red cards that should have been given, but they just weren't, which made many fans upset and made them think that there had to be some sort of change so that things like this wouldn't occur. Then when the concept of VAR arose, everyone was happy about it. Like, okay, finally we're going to see a change that will get rid of the corruption that sometimes take place in the field that certain fans would accuse certain teams of participating in because they felt that referees would be on the side of certain teams to help them advance or win matches, and they felt that with the technology this would be really hard to achieve because, as I mentioned, prior to the VAR being introduced, there was a lot of scandalous events that fans were generally upset with because they felt certain teams were benefited. Like offside goals were given to opposing teams, pens weren't called, red cards weren't being given when they should have. And that was the world of soccer prior to having VAR. But once it was introduced, certain fans felt that those same negative aspects were still occurring even with the technologies when in theory they shouldn't have even happened in the first place. They feel that certain teams, usually the more bigger teams, are benefited by this video system referee where the referees are using them but not effectively. That they're more used to help benefit a certain team and hurt a more smaller scale team, which ruins sometimes the beauty or like an underdog story of a certain team that the sport sometimes offer, which is at certain times unfair for the whole sport in general. Even the players themselves and managers have sometimes spoken about their negative view of VAR and feel that the whole concept is a bad thing. And there's even been in certain leagues, the head members of each club had a vote whether they wanted to keep the VAR system. And for the most part, many teams decide to keep it because they feel it's better to have the video system referee, even though there's a few controversies that take place within the system, than to just scrap it and get rid of it and basically play in a world where this technology isn't used that will bring more harm to certain teams than actually benefit them. and make the rules fair, essentially. Because let's get something clear. Because even though VAR does, in some instances, get certain things wrong, I feel that it's a good practice in theory and in execution, yes, for the most part. However, these it's technology at the end of the day, so people have to operate them. There have been mistakes in the past, but I do think they do more benefiting the whole sport than they do bring harm. And I feel sometimes when a certain team that is affected by it, their fans will see it as an agenda against them, that the refs are against them, that they're going to use technology, that it's going to hurt them. But it's not really that way. It's more the side that people can make mistakes and referees aren't exempt to that since they're people too. They're bound to make mistakes too. And I only started becoming a fan of the sport around 2018. So basically, all of the soccer I've seen has been with these technologies. And I didn't really watch matches that didn't have these technologies. And sometimes seeing replays of old games from back then, or even the highlights of those games, and I see the way how certain teams won matches with offside goals, or controversies, or in unfair methods, and it does like kind of make me feel a sense of unfairness for those teams because like they were done dirty when they shouldn't have, and if they had maybe the technology with them at those times, those matches wouldn't have gone the way that they did, and those teams wouldn't have won unjustly. And in my personal opinion, I don't think we should get rid of this whole VAR system. In my opinion, we should keep it. I think the solution that should be done, and many managers, fans, and players themselves have said that we need to get better referees, ones that are not bound to make more mistakes, that the ones that do make mistakes should be punished in some certain way or practice in theory so that instances that generate controversy don't tend to happen with big matches in regards to the technology aspect. And I feel once the technology is used in a way that doesn't hurt certain teams when they shouldn't have, people would see VAR as a more helpful thing than the negative view it has now. But I feel it's a long shot before we get to that. I feel many mistakes are gonna keep occurring in the next few years, maybe even longer. That won't keep fans happy, that they'll see VAR as something negative, that we should just get rid of it. But in my opinion, that's just gonna generate and bring more harm than it is gonna do good. One example I can think of at the top of my head where VAR got things wrong was a match that took place in the English Premier League in 2023 between English giants Liverpool and Tottenham, in which Liverpool was greatly affected in a bad way by the technology because Liverpool had scored the first goal of the match, but the technology determined that the goal that was scored was offside. But once replays were shown and fans got to see everything, they realized that no, there was no offside. The player, Luis Diaz, who scored the goal, was clearly miles onside, but the technology got it wrong. And it was mistakes like that that haunted Liverpool fans and even regular football fans that they themselves claimed that VAR was ruining the sport, especially when we consider that that match Tottenham won and Liverpool lost by a score of 2-1. But if Liverpool weren't disallowed that clear goal that should have stood, then they wouldn't have lost the match, would have at least gotten the draw, which would have given them a point to salvage, especially considering that Liverpool is a team that generally competes for the Premier League every season, and losing a game like that could hurt their title run chances. But instances like this tend to occur very rarely. I feel that games like this happen way more before we had the VAR. And so in my opinion, we need to keep VAR. And even though things like this are going to occur, the fans have to consider that without VAR, instances like this will tend to happen more and will bring more harm to the sport. And we desperately need VAR. And I do feel they're going to get more things right than they will wrong. And as long as we, as the top leagues and the presidents of the clubs take action to better refereeing decisions, I think VAR will operate better and will make more fans happy, and VAR won't be a concept that will be seen as negatively, at least in my opinion. But as I said, it'll probably be a few more years till we get to this point. I interrupt the show to bring the interactive trivia portion of the podcast, in which I'll ask 3 questions regarding to the topic of the podcast, and whoever comments the correct answers for all these questions, whoever does it first, they'll get a like, a comment, and a subscription back to their channel. First question: which streaming service is home to most of the Premier League matches in the United States? Next question: which was the first top flight league to introduce the concept of VAR? Final question: which 3 football clubs have the most fans worldwide? Those were all 3 questions. And once again, whoever comments first the correct answers to all 3 questions will get a like back, a comment, and a subscription back to their channel. Thank you for participating in the trivia, and we'll get right back to the show. On to the next topic, which is the idea of rigged matches. Now, what do I mean by rigged matches? So, what I mean when I'm talking about rigged matches, I specifically refer to the idea that certain teams are benefited, that get help from the refs, where their opponent that the team is playing against is hurt by certain decisions that referees take against them for an agenda to help, the bigger team advance to one of the more final stages, or help that bigger team win a match that leads them to a title, that helps them get closer to a title. And this has been something that has existed, I think, through the entire existence of the sport, where there's been cases where it's more than obvious that a certain team had aid from outside forces out of the pitch to help them win and advance to greater stages, and win by unfair decisions. Going more into specifics, I think the match, or the matches, I should say, that most fans can agree on, where a team was benefited like seen in no other instance, was in the 2002 World Cup. The host South Korea were claimed to have been benefited and helped by the ref in their matches against Italy and Spain, because South Korea beat Spain in the round of 16 and they beat Italy in the quarterfinals. And it's interesting to note because Italy and Spain are powerhouses and giants when it comes to national team football, and South Korea isn't really a team that has that many great quality players, or they don't have the manager to produce tactics to be powerhouse teams like this, and are more of an underteam dog. Now, given that this World Cup was co-hosted by South Korea, as the other half was hosted by Japan, it was more than likely that host would receive some form of help to help the national team advance or do well in a tournament hosted in their country, to boost the morale or prove a certain agenda of the home nation. In this instance, it was South Korea. For example, in both matches between Spain and Italy, those 2 teams were scored clear goals that should have stood but were disallowed. Clear penalties that should have been given to both Italy and Spain were not given to them by the ref. South Korea, in the match against Italy, they scored an offside goal, which should have not stood, but that goal was then beneficial for them to help eliminate Italy. And this generated many upset fans around the world at that time, because they knew that this match was clearly rigged to help South Korea advance, and Italy was done dirty. And something that I then found interesting was that the ref that took part in the South Korea and Italy match was then fired from his job of being a referee. He was suspended by it and eventually fired and was caught doing illegal things, like producing and transporting illegal substances. That then got him arrested and just proved that this man that they had to do the job was a shady person with no integrity. That didn't help. Um, Essentially have fair play and an important match in the sport, considering that we were in a World Cup. And that's one of the more cases that I personally find interesting, reading about that story and that ref and how everything went down. But it goes to show the dirty side and the corruption that this beautiful sport sometimes has. And it's just a sad reality that in, even in sports, we're going to see cases of corruption and dirty things that take place when they really shouldn't. But it's just a sad reality that it will happen, just like it happens in other aspects of our lives and other places, that corruption will always be bound to take place, unfortunately. Now, another instance of referee corruption taking place was in the 2009 Champions League knockout game between English giants Chelsea and Spanish powerhouse Barcelona. Now, this match is notorious and is regarded as the biggest refereeing scandal in terms of clubs, club teams, because in this, the first leg was played in Barcelona Stadium because the first match ended in a 0-0 draw, but many Barcelona fans claimed that their team was affected by the ref. But in my opinion, I've seen replays of that match, and I don't think there was anything really scandalous in my opinion. Yeah, sure, maybe a little dubious call that could have gone either way, either in their favor or against them. That doesn't really generate too much um negative controversy took place against them. But they used that to defend from what happened in the second match, because the second match was where the real controversy took place, because Chelsea were done a very scandalous refereeing part on them, because they had many decisions go against them when they shouldn't have. For example, a handball that should have been given in favor of them was not. A handball cleared by Barcelona's defender wasn't given. There was two other penalties that should have been given to Chelsea, again, not given. There was also red calls that should have been given to the Barca players that in theory would have benefited Chelsea, considering they would have had more players on the pitch. But again, they just weren't given. And even at the end of it all, that match ended as a 1-1 draw. And so on the aggregate score, it was a 1-1 draw, considering that the first match was 0-0 and in the second match it was 1-1. And the second match was at Chelsea Stadium. Barcelona scored an away goal, which was crucial in those times, because whichever team scored more away goals and when the aggregate score was a draw, the team that scored more away goals would go through. And in this case, Barcelona had scored more away goals because they scored at Chelsea Stadium while Chelsea didn't at Barcelona Stadium. That meant that Barca would go through, but it didn't take away from the fact that Chelsea were affected by the referee decisions given against them. And even at the end of the match, Chelsea's main player, Didier Drogba, looked at the camera and said that what happened was a disgrace. And it's one of the more iconic moments for the negative aspects that many fans remember from that match was Drogba's reaction to that. And many fans, not just Chelsea fans, football fans, felt that robbery. And in some cases, I would even say matches like this unites fans against the corruption aspect of it, where they want the team that's done dirty to essentially win against the team that is favored, and including the ref themselves, because it's an expression that sometimes soccer fans say that, oh, that team is playing with 12 players. The 12th man is the ref, because the ref is basically playing for them by giving them all the decisions in their favor and being unfair to the other team. And so sometimes fans, even the neutral fans, are against that and support a team that they don't even root for. just to essentially stand against that corruption, which, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense because no fans want that to take place in the sport. But something that got me thinking, and I've heard many fans talk about this, is that the whole concept of there being rigged matches is always going to exist. Now, why is this? Because for the most part, the teams that are benefited in any so-called claimed rigged matches are the bigger teams. The bigger teams that are more successful, the ones that have more fans, have a bigger following, are the ones that are always who benefit in the long run. In the long run, teams like Real Madrid or Liverpool, even Barcelona, and even national teams like Brazil or Argentina, the more successful teams are the ones that are always claimed to have the refs in their favor. But in my opinion, as I've heard other people said, this is essentially part for the business aspect because it benefits a corporation and the governing bodies such as FIFA or certain confederations. It benefits them to have the bigger team advance to the later stages because they have in theory more fans. And if the bigger team advances to a more further stage like a semifinal or a final, then this they will sell more tickets because a bigger team is going to have more fans than a smaller team. And sometimes these confederations and corporations, they prefer the money over like the passion or other things that the sport has to offer. And so given that even the sport is now seen as a business by the top heads of the scene, they're gonna want for the big teams to have referee decisions go in their favor, even if they're being unfair. But that's just to generate more money by having those teams go into the later stages and sell more tickets because they have more fans. And at the end of the day, this is all just business, which shouldn't happen, but it does kind of shed more light to this situation and kind of gives I wouldn't necessarily say excuse or justification, but it does give reasoning as to maybe why they take place, why these rigged matches take place, which it shouldn't be, but it does shed more light on this issue. And the sport is a business, and this is why some rigged matches happen. On to the next topic, we move on to bandwagon fans. Now, what is a bandwagon fan? So, when soccer fans claim that a fan is a bandwagon fan, what they mean by that is that they aren't loyal to a certain team and that they basically switch their own teams, but they switch their teams when a certain team they support is doing bad and another team is in a good moment. And they're saying that these fans just want to support the teams that are on top, that are successful, that are winning trophies, and would rather support that than stick through the original team they supported that are perhaps going in the bad moment, they're constantly losing matches, and maybe aren't winning titles. And these type of fans aren't seen positively at all by fans who are really loyal to their clubs. For example, an instance of this that I can remember is between Barcelona and Manchester City fans. Now, these so-called fans used to be Barcelona fans when Barcelona was on the top of the scene, when they would win titles, when they would dominate competitions like the Champions League, when they had Messi, when they had the best team in the world. But once their key players like Messi or Neymar started to leave, and then Barcelona started to do bad in the Champions League, when they would lose matches in big fashion and not win titles, constantly lose to Real Madrid. Many Barcelona fans, they decided to actually stop supporting Barcelona, and they went on to support Manchester City in England because they were a team that were rising, doing well, actually competing against Real Madrid, what Barcelona couldn't do at that time. And City were winning trophies and doing well, and so many of those fans went to Manchester City and now claim themselves to be Manchester City fans. But then it became interesting because in this season, Manchester City had a downfall where after winning 4 straight titles, now this is the first season where they're actually being bad and not doing well. They even went up against Real Madrid in the Champions League and lost and got eliminated to them. But surprisingly, this season, Barcelona has given the best season that they had in like 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. They've beaten Real Madrid. They're the number one favorites to win both their league, the Spanish league, and the actual Champions League themselves. And it's interesting to know that some of those Manchester City fans who switched from being Barcelona fans the first time are now going back to being Barca fans, which makes people really be mad. Like, why? You should never switch a team just because of their current success. You should pick one team and stick with it to the long run in both the successful moments and the difficult moments where things aren't going well for their club. That's what makes and defines a true fan. And that's why these bandwagon fans are given that name bandwagon, because they're only jumping on the trend of the team that's doing well at those specific times. And they would rather be with them than the original club they supported when they're doing bad. And people have a negative perception of those fans. Something I would also agree is that these bandwagon fans don't share the same passion for the club as do the loyal fans. And I feel that the passion side of the sport is something that's really crucial and important for the sport, because at the end of the day, passion drives a certain team. The passion generates us fans to feel happiness or sadness or anger, frustration, celebrations. They make us feel different feelings that a bandwagon fan wouldn't have, because they're not used to supporting the team or actually falling in love with the team like loyal fans would. And so, what's the point of supporting a club if that passion isn't there? And I do feel that that passion is earned or received once a fan has been through the dark times and the successful times as well. And only in those cases would one truly feel a passion for a club. And bandwagon fans, I don't feel, would have that passion, which is why another reason why fans aren't too fond of those bandwagon fans, because they won't feel the same passion that they would, given that they've been loyal to their clubs even since they were little, because they've been with their teams through many years. They've been through the dark times, through the good times, and those are the true fans that would genuinely feel a sense of passion. And another thing that comes with bandwagon fans that drives away from the original concept of what a bandwagon fans has to do with international fans. Now, what exactly do I mean by this? So, what I refer to this when I mean international fans, it means fans that support a big team, let's say in England or Spain or Italy, but those fans don't reside in those cities of those big clubs or even in that same country where those teams compete and live international in other countries. And that's why the loyal fans of those clubs that do live in those cities or do live in those countries feel that those international fans won't feel the same passion, because they might not have the same connection, like maybe that international or even that national connection that certain teams might generate, because international fans won't understand what that feeling is like. To give a more specific example, let's say a fan from the US, let's say they support a Spanish team in Real Madrid. Now, what is a full-born American that has no connection to Spain? What are they going to feel for the city of Madrid or a team that's in Madrid? You understand what I mean? And many fans claim that to genuinely feel any sort of emotion for a team, they have to live there. They have to have that national aspect or even that city connection to the team. Like, they must live in Madrid to feel what Real Madrid team can do, because if they live abroad and have never been to Madrid or have no connection to the actual city, they won't feel what the loyal fans who actually live there feel. And while I do understand that argument, I would go to say that I don't necessarily agree with it, because from what I've seen, there's many international fans around the world of big teams. Over here in North America, in the United States, even in continents like South America, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, there's many fans that literally dedicate their lives to supporting teams in different nations like the UK or Italy or even Spain. And they do feel the passion side of it, even though loyal fans might say they won't, but they do. I've seen videos of international fans, like for example, when Liverpool lost the final in 2022, I remember seeing African Liverpool fans crying and being upset that the team lost. And if that's not passion for a team, then I don't know what is. And another thing that's also important to note is that for the most part, around the world, whatever soccer matches are taking place, they always take place around nighttime, like around 8 or 9 p.m. And in Europe, that also happens. Now, that being said, the time zones exist, which means that for fans in Africa, Oceania, or North America, or whatever other place in the world that's not in Europe, the time zone is going to affect them. And the matches won't be played at 9 at night, which means that in some instances, in some parts of the world, those matches will take place very early in the morning. And in the US, that's what happens. In some Premier League matches, they take place at 6 a.m., like very early in the morning, before people even tend to wake up. But there are hardcore fans that do wake up at those times, that they make that effort to wake up early just to watch their team. And to me, that shows a lot of commitment and shows the passion and desire that fans have for the team. If they truly didn't support the teams, then I don't feel they would even wake up or even make that effort to watch those matches and would, for example, just say they're a fan, but not even watch the matches or not care if a team wins or loses. But given that those international fans have that passion for the team, they do feel those emotions and make that effort to want to watch their teams, I do think there are real fans and not bandwagon just for the sake of being international, not being part of that country or that city. But I do think that a fan that supports a team and lives in that city are gonna feel the passion and more interest in that team than an international fan. But that doesn't mean that the international fans don't feel those emotions too. I don't think international fans are necessarily all bandwagons, even though there might be some that are in that realm. But I do think that most aren't, and they might support their team because they want to have a team that they support that does well over in the top flight of soccer. And when they don't, they might feel upset or even sad, which shows that they do feel that sense of passion. But another point to note is that sometimes the loyal fans claim that, oh, these international fans or other fans are what makes them bandwagon is that they're jumping on the trend to support a big team. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're supporting a successful team because there's many big teams that are in drought that have gone at this point many years without winning a title, such as Arsenal, that's gone 20 years without winning anything important. Manchester United, that's gone 10 years without winning a trophy, or an Italian team like AC Milan, that's fallen from their high points and have been struggling in the recent few years. But they're still classified as big team, popular teams that are the most teams that are looked upon well and that generate news, and people are interested in them because they are big teams at the end of the day. However, many international fans decide to support teams like this, or even the more successful ones. They decide to go for them too. And what loyal fans of those certain clubs claim is that, okay, they're bandwagons because they're choosing to support a big club, a club that has protagonism, a big club that's popular. Like, if you truly want to feel that passion or that desire, why not support a smaller scale team? Teams that fight relegation, teams that might not have the same popularity. Why not go for them? They claim that what makes them a bandwagon is that wanting to support and, feeling that passion and connection to a bigger club, and the fact that they want to choose a bigger club rather than maybe go for a different team that's more small scale is what makes them a bandwagon. And to me, this is the most argument that makes sense because I can understand where the argument is coming from because I can agree. Like, if there's, let's say, a fan from Canada that genuinely wants to feel the passion and the desire of supporting an English team, why not go for like a small scale team like a Southampton or even Leicester City? Why not support smaller scale teams like that? Why necessarily support a big club like Liverpool or Man United or an Arsenal? Why support them? The reason they want to support them is because, okay, they're bandwagons. They want to support a popular team that can be successful, that they might have their dark moment, but in the end, they're a popular team that, for the most part, they have been successful at some point in history, and people want to be part of that success. rather than support a smaller scale team that has no success but will generate passion, will generate interest, which is why the bandwagon aspect comes into it. But then again, I don't think that takes away from the passion that international fans feel for a big club that they might support. And it's a very interesting topic to look at, the whole concept of bandwagon fans, because I do understand the arguments that both sides have to offer. I do feel that international fans can have their teams that they support abroad, big and popular teams. But again, I don't think for any club in the world, it won't be the most loyal fans of those teams that the fans who go to the stadium on a day-to-day basis, that live in that city, that have that city connection that they do to their club. At the end of the day, I do think those are going to be the most realist fans of those clubs. While international fans can have a big desire and passion for the club, they won't do it the same way as loyal fans do, the ones who live in that city. And that's honestly my take on these international or bandwagon fans. On to the final topic of the show is this idea of streaming services. Now, why do I refer to streaming services? Now, why I talk about them and list them as a controversy is because many matches happen now on streaming services, depending on what area in the world you're from. Over here in the US, um, services such as Hulu, Disney Plus, Peacock, and even ones that are specifically related to sports, such as ESPN or VIX, are all streaming services that show, highlight, and showcase actual live matches that take place. But something that you may have picked up on is that I listed around 5 streaming services, and that's really important to note because a lot of soccer fans, they want to watch many matches because there's a lot of matches to follow. There's international matches, there's the Champions League, there's the domestic leagues if they're interested in them. There might be other domestic leagues that they might want to follow, other international competitions. And there isn't not even one streaming service that has all of those matches, those live matches taking place on their site. If a fan truly wants to achieve that, they are going to have various different streaming services to be able to watch all those matches live. And as we know, streaming services aren't exactly the cheapest, and some of them are more expensive than others, but for the most part, a lot of them tend to be expensive. And if fans truly want to watch um, all sorts of matches and a vast amount of matches, they're gonna have to most likely have more than one streaming services, which means they're gonna have to waste money. And depending on their plan for the streaming services, that they pay monthly or yearly, that's gonna take a toll on their on their finances, which makes many fans complain because many of them obviously don't have the luxury of visiting the stadiums because matches take place in Europe or in other parts of the world, but they at least want to watch the matches live. But they're gonna need various streaming services to be able to watch all these different matches. And before, it didn't used to be that way. Before, a lot of matches would be played on live TV, but with an occasional match or a certain competition here or there being on a specific streaming service. But now many of those leagues have moved to operating in certain streaming services. That means that the only way they can be watched are through services like Peacock or even Fubo TV. And given that they can only be viewed on there, the fans, if they truly want to watch certain competitions, that their only option is to get those streaming services and pay that expensive price to be able to watch matches. But at the end of the day, it's too expensive. And there's many streaming services that fans are going to have to get if they truly want to watch all different kinds of matches. The only other solution that can exist but isn't an entire 100% solution is having a TV provider. But again, TV providers in the US in this day and age aren't necessarily the most cheapest. They're very expensive, but that's the closest thing that tends to offer the most live matches. But even then, it's not 100% guarantee because some Premier League matches, for example, are only exclusively on Peacock, at least here in the US, which means those certain Premier League matches can't be watched by them. They may watch Champions League matches or some Premier League matches, even matches in games in Spain or Italy. They can watch them on the TV provider, but they're going to be missing out on some Premier League games. Which then goes to show why this whole concept of matches being on streaming services is one that fans aren't too happy with. They feel it's too expensive, and there's too many streaming services that a fan must get if they want to watch the most amount of games because it takes a toll on them because it's too expensive. And fans want there to be, for example, only one streaming service where everything is included down to Champions Leagues, to domestic leagues, to international tournaments like the World Cup or the Copa America or the Euro Cup, where they want all those matches to be played on a certain site or streaming service. But realistically, that I don't see that ever happening because if this happens, many of those sites will lose a lot of money because most of those fans will just go to that specific service that offers those matches, and more services benefit from different leagues and competitions being under different providers because that means more fans are going to be interested in getting their services to be able to watch those matches, which is why this is going to be going on for a while. As for me, the only streaming services that I have are VIX Premium, Hulu, and Disney Plus, where so I can watch some Premier League matches. I can also watch um, La Liga Spanish games. I can watch international tournaments like the Champions League and domestic tournaments in the within countries like Mexico or and in other international tournaments like the Copa America. But I do get to miss out on a lot of things like certain qualifiers for the World Cup from around the world or the Premier League matches that aren't on Peacock because I don't have Peacock, which yes, it's a bummer not being able to see certain matches that I would really want to see, but I think it can be doable if you have the right services for the more important matches. But at the end of the day, no one will be happy with whatever there is. And so our only option is to stick with what we have and enjoy with what we have and make the most out of the things that we do have. So that was the final topic. I'm so happy if you tuned in to listen. This was a fun show to cover. It was very interesting to go in depth and look at certain angles of some of the controversial aspects that the sport had to offer and look at the viewpoints for those certain topics that certain fans or certain people might have. And it was generally interesting to look at. I'm so happy you tuned in and really hope you can tune in to the next show. Thank you.